The real-time real estate segment today being brought to you by rsrmoney.com, rsrmoney.com. Let's take a look and see. We've got foreclosure activity still lower than the norm. Surprise, surprise. Have you seen headlines talking about the increase in foreclosures in today's housing market? If so, they may leave you feeling a bit uneasy about what's ahead. But remember, these clickbait titles don't always give you the full story. The truth is, if you compare the current numbers with what usually happens in the market, you'll see there's no need to worry. Somebody tell this to Diana Olick, please. Putting the headlines into perspective, the increase that the media is calling attention to is misleading. That's because that's a real surprise, isn't it? That they would be giving you misleading information.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
That's because they're only comparing the most recent numbers to a time where foreclosures were at historic lows. And that's making it sound like a bigger deal than it is. In 2020 and 2021, the moratorium and forbearance program helped millions of homeowners stay in their homes, allowing them to get back on their feet during a very challenging period. When the moratorium came to an end, there was an unexpected rise in foreclosures. But just because foreclosures are up doesn't mean the housing market is in trouble. Historical data shows there is not a wave of foreclosures. Instead of comparing today's numbers with the last few abnormal years, it's better to compare to long-term trends, specifically to the housing crash, since that's what people worry may happen again. Take a look at a graph if you're watching us on ronsingleradio.tv, any of our socials, the ABC News and Talk AM 1490 video feed. It uses foreclosure data from Adam, a property data provider, to show foreclosure activity has been consistently lower since the crash in 2008. And if you, again, the chart that we've got there, U.S. foreclosure activity increases from 2022, but still below pandemic levels. So look at that chart. On 2021, now this is where the media gives you all a bunch of BS. 2021, there was 151,000 foreclosures, foreclosure filings. In 2022, there was 324,000 nationwide numbers. Media is going to come out and say that these numbers, that the foreclosures are doubling. In 2010, there was 2.9 million. So this doubling number is still 90% lower. Think about that. While foreclosure filings are up in the latest report, it's clear that this is nothing like it was back then. In fact, we're not even back at levels we'd see in more normal years like 2019. Rick Sharga, founder and CEO of the C.J. Patrick Company, explains, quote, foreclosure activity is still only at about 60% of pre-pandemic levels, unquote. That's largely because buyers today are more qualified and less likely to default on their loans. Delinquency rates are still low, and most homeowners have enough equity to keep them from going into foreclosure. Molly Basil, principal economist at CoreLogic, says, quote, U.S. mortgage delinquency rates remained healthy in October, with the overall delinquency rate unchanged from a year earlier and the serious delinquency rate remaining at historic low. Borrowers in later stages of delinquencies are finding alternatives to defaulting on their home loans, unquote. The reality is, while increasing, the data shows a foreclosure crisis is not where the market is today or where it's headed. Bottom line, even though the housing market is experiencing an expected rise in foreclosures, it's nowhere near the crisis levels seen when the housing bubble burst. If you have questions, give me a call, 800-306-1990. Right now, I'm going to say there's very, very little reason to go through foreclosure. Very little reason. There are boatloads of equity. Blake was just talking about equity in the last segment. There's boatloads of equity out there. Why would you walk away from that equity and put a ding on your credit report for the next 7 to 10 years when you can sell your property, take some of your equity, pay off some of your other debts, and take some of that equity and buy a new house? Just throwing that out there for you. Don't do it. That is the Real-Time Real Estate segment brought to you by rsrmoney.com, rsrmoney.com.